Starts now. What if diplomacy was used rather than military power? Well, the world would be a very different place. Donald Trump probably wouldn't be the president of the United States, and if he was, him and Kim Jong-un wouldn't need to resort to insults like dotard and Rocket Man to hide the fact that neither of them know what they're doing. Overall, the world would be a better place with less threat to the safety of the humankind. This is why my partner and I affirm the following resolution: on balance, diplomacy has better maintained peace than military power. The goal of the PRO is to have all issues resolved and framework where future issues are resolved as well, which can be only achieved with the optimal use of diplomacy to preserve positive peace and prevent casualties. The burden of the con is to prove that they can create positive peace and save lives with military power. There is a significant distinction between peace, positive peace, and negative peace, which we will first define and emphasize throughout this debate. Positive peace is the idea that a peaceful situation can be created without the use of any type of power to maintain it, and includes justice. It is the integration of human society. Negative peace is the situation where issues are not resolved but are stopped. Instead of maintaining positive peace, military power more likely hurts the situation it is meant to help. Therefore, Judge, although the opposition may achieve negative peace, they do not achieve the resolution of maintaining peace. If the opponent cannot prove that their resolution achieves positive and therefore real peace, they cannot win the debate. Contention 1. Diplomacy outweighs military power. Subpoint A, preventative diplomacy. As per a UN official speaking for the organization, most of the time, the root causes of most conflicts that may or have already turned violent were political problems requiring political solutions. Secondly, distrust among rival parties in national conflicts often ran so high that they were unable to arrive at compromises without diplomatic encouragement. He also says that ideally we want to prevent violence from erupting in the first place, but even if that fails, robust diplomacy is still required to end the fighting through negotiations and then to help countries navigate the difficult politics of reconciliation and rebuilding. Too many nations fail in this last step and slide right back into conflict, which is why diplomacy is necessary. If this does not happen, the root cause will get intensified and eventually reoccur, so the negative is not causing peace, but rather pushing for war. Subpoint B, collateral damage. Diplomacy also better maintains peace by preventing the risk of uncontrolled casualties caused by the use of military power. The most important casualties caused by military power that diplomacy prevents is all the lives that are lost due to armed conflicts, as well as collateral damage. An example of this is how the U.S. has been bombing Syria in order to reduce the risks of ISIS. This bombing has in fact caused 60% of innocent civilian deaths in Syria. Air Wars, a UK-based watchdog group, estimates the civilian death toll from the coalition airstrikes at over 3,800. A strike on March 17th, where the U.S. bombed a building in Mosul aimed at killing 2 ISIS snipers, caused a building to collapse, killing 105 innocent civilians. These ineffective military incidents not only increase violence and death, but also increase recruitments for terrorists. The innocent lives we kill by chasing terrorists create more terrorists who have a bad image of America. In the final analysis, what really matters in this debate is creating positive peace with the use of preventative diplomacy and preventing all of the collateral damage caused by military power. On the PRO, we stand on the side of both the world leaders looking to resolve conflict in the most efficient way possible and the people affected by the conflict, affected by the decisions leaders make. Armed conflict is a major source of many lives lost, which diplomacy prevents by approaching the issue in a peaceful way, rather than harmfully affecting not only the opposing side of the conflict, but the country, the people of the country, who are actually at a loss, even though they didn't participate. Since military power creates negative peace, pushes war, and causes many deaths, which could have been prevented through diplomacy, we, and you should as well, affirm the resolved. On balance, diplomacy has better maintained peace than military power. We strongly urge a pro ballot. Thank you.
No. So, con questioning first pro versus second con for 2 minutes. Everyone's
Okay. A partner ready? Yep. Opponent ready?
Yep.
Judge ready? Okay. Time begins now. Okay, so you mentioned how so I have a question. You mentioned how how military power can create negative peace.
Yep.
Well, during scenarios such as like World War II, when diplomacy is proven ineffective, then how did those scenarios get resolved?
I'm sorry, I didn't really understand the question. When was diplomacy ineffective during World War II?
At the beginning of World War II, when Hitler was rising to power, countries did all types of diplomatic actions against him. However, he denied all of them and he was not willing to negotiate. Therefore, they were forced to use military power.
Right, so what was your question?
My question is, how would diplomacy be used in these scenarios to resolve the conflict?
Well, diplomacy although diplomacy doesn't work for all conflicts, like we agreed at that point that diplomacy does not work for all conflicts, but in spite of this, diplomacy works for most conflicts, and that is just one example of how it has.
Your arguments were structured around how military power causes all these negative things, and for short-term lives and all sorts of things. Do you have any evidence on how diplomacy could potentially resolve these same issues?
So what do you mean? Like, do you want an example of how diplomacy has worked?
What are your, on how, a theoretical on how diplomacy could have resolved some of the issues in which military power was implemented? The problem is that military power was implemented before diplomacy was able to be used. So what we're saying is that diplomacy solves the root causes of the problems. But do you have any evidence that if diplomacy had been implemented in these scenarios, that it would have been effective?
The problem is diplomacy wasn't implemented in these scenarios, so going to hypotheticals isn't the point of this debate.
So you have no evidence that it could have worked?
I'm not saying that.
Non-constructive. Do you want that?
I think it's still pretty good.
I think you should be more aggressive that one. That was my question.
Okay, partner ready? Opponents ready?
Yep.
Judge ready? Then my time begins now. So, my partner and I stand in firm negation of the claim diplomacy better maintains peace than military peace. So, our first contention one is deterrence. So we state that Thomas McClerney, who is a retired lieutenant general and the founder of the U.S. government reform states that without the United States military, there would be simply no United States of America. In other words, really what we're trying to say here is that without any military force to defend the country, we won't have, there will be no United States of America. And he goes on to discuss how this would lead to world chaos with lack of a leader. And obviously, without the strong protection of a military, any country could be taken over and rise a conflict. If no country has any sort of a defense, they will just be taken out immediately. But however, through military use of deterrence, conflict may not occur in the first place, and we support this with a guy named Robert Farley, who was a lecturer at the Patterson School of Diplomacy and International Commerce, and he states that over the last 50 years, Israel has built up an extremely strong air force, and he also believes that the other countries are less likely to mess, and I quote, mess with the IAF because of this, and also their country, and so in addition to Israel, deterrence was considered, and I say this, was considered successful during the Cold War because both Russia and America had built their own nuclear weapons, but they were too afraid. They were too afraid to ever use them upon each other. And clearly, as I've stated through all my points, deterrence through the use of a strong military can maintain peace by never creating a problem in the first place. And I'm going to go into contention 2, which is stopping countries from gaining nuclear weapons. By preventing the countries from acquiring the nuclear weapons, the United States will be able to protect its citizens. So I'm not referring to as nuclear weapons going to be protected citizens. I'm referring to the whole general idea of nuclear power in the long term and the sort of future effects that it will have on any country, including the U.S. Protecting of citizens, which is believed by philosopher John Locke, is a social contract between the government and the U.S. citizens. and it also gives a protection of global reputation. Example being, we shall not negotiate with terrorists, as a general standpoint. And the impact caused by preventing nuclear weapons are huge. Like, the margins are huge. First, there's a negative emotional connection to nuclear weapons that causes fear. And with preventing nuclear weapons, that fear will be taken away. We're saying we're going to remove the idea of nuclear weapons, and we're going to empower, and we're going to bring about nuclear power in a good and positive way. So, and also when nuclear weapons have been used, they have caused thousands of deaths as used during World War II. And in conclusion, with our two contentions, hard power is basically used coercion either by force or economic sanctions. These two can sometimes are sometimes needed for deterrence. For these reasons, Judge, we urge you to vote for con ballot. Thank you very much.
So pro questioning, first con and first pro.
Opponents ready?
Yep.
Judge ready? Time starts now. So in your first contention, you state that without the U.S. military, there would be no United States.
Yes, I do see that.
How does this relate to maintaining peace?
Well, I mean, it has everything to do with maintaining peace because, in general, without even a military force, there wouldn't be any, like, how do I say this? Like, there would just be a lot of chaos, and with chaos, you cannot maintain peace.
Right, but with the if the U.S. Did not, so let's go. So how does the U.S. specifically? So you need the military to create peace. So are you basing this off a U.S.-centric argument, or are you just using this as one example?
I'm just using this as one example, as like that we use in our own case. Yes.
Okay. So you also in your contention too, you said that military power stops countries from gaining nuclear weapons, right?
Wait, can you repeat that again?
In contention two, you said that you would stop countries from gaining nuclear weapons, right? But wasn't the Cold War an example of how nuclear weapons were used as a deterrent?
Well, that's not. I mean, nuclear weapons were the people from Russia in the Cold War, Russians and Americans were too afraid to use nuclear weapons. But I'm saying
right, but didn't they already have the nuclear weapons? Like, they were pointing them at each other, but they didn't want to shoot. But like,
yeah, but they were too afraid to.
Right, but in your second contention, you say that you want to use military power to stop countries from gaining nuclear power. But in your first contention, you say that nuclear power is used as a deterrent. So, do you want nuclear power, or do you not want nuclear power?
Well, it's like a different. Well, like, yes, nuclear, but nuclear. Okay. What I was going to say is that nuclear power is still, yes, we do evaluate it as a bad thing, but it still in the future can be evaluated as a positive aspect of our own economy and nation.
Okay. So partner ready?
Yep.
Opponents ready?
Yep.
Judge ready? Alright, my time begins now. First, I'm going to attack their first sentence of their claim or of their case in that with Trump and Kim Jong-un. This is political views and political stances, so therefore it's irrelevant. Moving on to their first contention, in terms of how diplomacy outweighs military power. I disagree with this because, first off, they give tons of evidence about how military power causes deaths and there's all these problems via military power. Well, my argument against that is that in some scenarios, in most of these scenarios, diplomacy is not an option. This is because the use of diplomacy is in order to interact with one another and create deals and compromise. However, in examples such as with ISIS or with other terrorist groups and during World War II, even when diplomacy was implemented, it was not successful. For example, during World War II, countries did all they could to help each other out and to help build up against the Germans. However, this was not successful, and the only force to stopping Hitler's rise was the use of military power. And while it did take some lives, there was no other option. Moving on, their argument is that in order for us to win this debate, we have to win the argument of creating positive peace. They submit to the argument that military power solves negative peace. However, now I'm going to give 2 reasons on why it causes positive peace. My first reason is that through deterrence, which is our entire first contention, deterrence building up military power ensures safety within a country. And if a country has ensured safety, that will create a positive reaction to the people because they feel safe. This is positive. Additionally, while military power may take lives in the short term, it will resolve conflict. So once a conflict is resolved, one side wins. When a side wins, therefore it is happy because it took a victory. This is another way of how it maintains peace, positive peace. So not only have they not proven how diplomacy can be a resolution to negative peace or conflicts in general, we also have provided reasoning behind why it can claim positive peace. Moving on to defense from the cross-exam. They claim that our first contention does not have to do with maintaining peace, but like I just said, building up military weapons and ensuring safety does maintain peace. And in terms of nuclear weapons, we are not in favor of nuclear weapons. However, this was used as a way. While nuclear weapons may decrease, in future examples, instead of using nuclear weapons, it could just be any kind of weapon. So maybe they'll use armed forces against each other. So this is just an example in the past, and while it may decrease, it still can improve, such as our Israel example with building up their air force. For those reasons, Judge, I urge a conval. Thank you.
For questioning, do you want that?
I think
Can we have
Oh, okay.
10 seconds of prep, please?
Okay. Tell me what to ask about.
In most scenarios.
Tell me your definition of positive peace. Like, ask them for their definition of positive peace because I think we need to clarify what it is. Oh, no, it's
No, we're good. Okay. Judge ready? Opposition ready?
Yes.
And partner ready? My time will begin now. Alright, so first you mentioned that well, actually, before we get into what you said, can you please define positive peace for me? What is your definition of positive peace, just to clarify?
Well, there's no clear definition of positive peace, but if I had to make one, it would be
What is
creating
making positive peace?
happiness in the citizens of their country and conjoining together with being happy with
Would
one
you
another.
agree that this includes strengthening relations, saving lives, improving the quality of life, and improving the economy?
Well, if strengthening alliances directly affects the citizens' mood, then sure, but I don't see the
So are you saying it doesn't relate to positive peace? Strengthening.
Not necessarily.
Okay. So you also said that deterrence ensures safety, which is how it creates positive peace. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Well,
So
that's one of the ways. Yes.
yes. So you also had an example of this, which was the Cold War. Am I correct?
That was not the example we used. Well, yes. It
You
was
still
the example
used
we
an
used.
example of
Yeah,
the
we
Cold
did.
War as deterrence. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yes. So now, if the deterrence in the Cold War ensured safety, do you believe that there was tension during the Cold War?
There was some
Do you-
tension, but it was unquantitative.
Do you believe that it still existed
On a small level.
on a small level?
I don't know how to
There's
quantify
still-
that. It could have.
You don't have to quantify it. Was there a large level of tension?
I don't know. There may have been a large level of tension.
Okay.
There may not have.
So, if there was tension, how did you ensure positive peace?
Well, so you have to outweigh causes. So, like I go back to my example, if America had been taken over, you have to outweigh causes. Maybe the insurity of safety and peace, if you have the insurity of safety and peace outweighs the amount of a small amount of fear.
Thank you.
Pro attack.
Yes,
Could we
please.
have 30 seconds of prep?
Okay, so I already have
Terrorism. Deterrence was the other one. Terrorism. Nazi factors. Okay, and then you have to talk about how they contact these.
Yeah.
You have to talk about the definition of positive peace is convoluted because you're talking about.
Where's our definition?
Yeah.
Can I have a framework?
Yes, framework. And you need to talk about like why their definition of positive peace isn't necessarily the correct one because it's unquantifiable. Happiness is unquantifiable. You cannot measure someone's happiness.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. It's 3 seconds, 3 minutes.
Okay. Judge ready? Sure. Opposition ready? Partner ready?
Yep.
All right. My time will begin now. So first I'll attack their case, and if time permits, I'll reiterate points of our case. Their first contention was about deterrence. They claim that since military power acts as a deterrent, it maintains peace. We have 3 responses to this. First, military power as a deterrent does not maintain peace. In fact, turn that argument against them. It causes arms races. Empirically, if one country has more weapons, all of the other countries around the country will increase the amount of arms they have in order to stay competitive in the field of interactions. As found by the Oxford University International Peace Institute Oslo, an initial exogenous increase in military expenditure by one country is more than doubled in both of the original country and its neighbor. An example of this is the Middle East conflict in Bangladesh, where there were small global arms increase races. Another example is the pre-First World War naval arms race, where the United Kingdom, at the largest navy of the world, there was a lot of nuclear buildup within the U.S., Japan, and South America. As a result of arms races created by the use of military power, over 4 million people have died, 20 million refugees have been produced, and 24 million people have been displaced. Arms races can also increase chances of war by 331%, according to Brigham Young University, as well as increase the likelihood of disputes and the probability that these disputes would end in war and escalate the severity of wars. According to Toby Ryder from Boston University, doing exactly the opposite of what the negative claims the military power acting as a deterrent would do. Moreover, empirically, it has been shown that military power does not act as a deterrent, such as in Afghanistan and in Iran, where it actually made things worse. Finally, even if military power does not act as a successful deterrent, which we have already proved invalid, it does not actually create peace, rather creating negative peace, which builds tension in countries. Their second contention was about stopping countries from getting nuclear weapons and nuclear power in the long term. We just wanted to point out that their first and second contentions actually contradict, because in order to have deterrence, you need to have nuclear weapons. So if you're taking away nuclear weapons, then you can't have deterrence. So their whole case is actually contradictory. And they also talk about terrorism and non-state actors, and we have 3 responses to this as well. First, their whole contention is based on the assumption that military power can solve situations diplomacy cannot, which, turn that argument against them, actually doesn't solve the root cause of issues, which creates negative peace and eventually incites even more conflict. Using force to preserve peace breeds negative peace and discontentment after a conflict. In fact, a prominent example of this is how the repressive measures put onto Germany after the Great War provoked yet another world war, whereas soft power used to construct the European Union resulted in almost 70 years of Europe-wide peace. And finally, we just wanted to go back to our framework of positive peace. They have an unclear definition of positive peace, while we have clearly defined it for you as the idea that a peaceful situation can be created without the use of any type of power to maintain it. And they do not prove this in their case, which is why we strongly urge a pro ballot today. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Oh yeah. Yeah. So, can you just repeat your point about what your idea about nuclear weapons?
What do you mean?
Like,
Can you just be a little bit more specific about what I need to repeat?
Meaning why you think they are such why you think they're bad in your own definition?
Wait, why I think what is bad? Sorry.
Nuclear weapons basically. Why?
Why we think nuclear weapons are bad?
Yes.
I don't think we ever mentioned that.
Okay. Next question. Okay, so you stated that in our case that we both of our contentions that we contradicted both of them.
Yeah.
But don't you realize that we did bring up the point about the Israelis, and let me just state that.
I'm not sure how that's relevant to your two contentions being contradictory.
I know, but you state how deterrence can be used as intimidation, right?
Can you repeat that?
Do you state how deterrence can be a way or form of bringing up intimidation? Did you state that?
Of bringing? No, we did not.
We did not. Okay. I don't know what I'm saying. Can we just call that time? 'Cause I don't really know what's
Judge ready?
Yes.
Opponents ready?
Yes.
Time starts now. First, I would like to go back to the concept of positive peace. It isn't just about the happiness of the people. During the Great Depression, there was peace, sure, but in the United States, but the people weren't happy. Going back to the point, positive peace is the idea that a peaceful situation can be created without the use of any power to maintain it. While the con did not prove that they create positive peace. All they did was state that the people are happy after a war is resolved. Well, obviously the people are happy after a war is resolved. They don't want to be fighting, but they didn't want the war to happen in the first place. But how long will that happiness last? How long will their definition of positive peace be really maintained? When you use military power, as I have stated in our opening case and as my partner has stated in her attack case, military power does not solve the root cause of the issue. It merely stops it for an uncertain amount of time. After that amount of time, there is no telling what could happen. In fact, the nations could go back to war, which could be devastating for the nation. Our argument against deterrent, they argue that there is that deterrence, military deterrence is needed to maintain peace. But then they argue that they want to stop countries from gaining nukes. While you don't necessarily need nukes for a successful military deterrence, they are the highest level of military deterrence, and they're the most effective form of deterrence. So saying that you don't want the most effective form of military deterrence kind of goes against their own statements. They also brought up a point about terrorists, which my partner refuted in her attack speech, as well as a point about deterrence, which she also refuted. Just to reiterate those claims, military power as a deterrent does not maintain peace. It creates arms races, it creates buildup of weapons, which, according to the opponent, is what they don't want. So why would you say that you don't want something and then immediately go back and say that, oh, but the thing is good? They also say that there's tension. They also say that there was no tension during the Cold War, thus there was a positive peace during the Cold War. But the people were unhappy, the people were in fear, so that simply isn't true. For all these reasons, we urge a pro-ballot. Thank you.
Partner ready? Opponents ready?
Yep.
Judge ready? Okay, then I begin. So I believe that they did state about how the purpose of deterrence is to raise armed races, but really the purpose of deterrence is to properly protect the country. And we have stated as lots of times in our own contentions that we have proof that that protection can be used in the form of military power, such as the fact that so basically the fact that deterrence was a success during the Cold War because Russia and America built up their nuclear weapons, which intimidated one another in never engaging in conflict at all. Yet, we did say, I understand that you say that that nuclear weapons we consider bad, but I'm not going to get any more into that, but I'm just going to now back up my points about just historical evidence. So let's go back to World War II. So World War II is basically a time where Germany was fighting with other countries such as the USA because there was issues going on. But really diplomacy wasn't really somewhat diplomacy was tried in World War II, but really it wasn't a success. It was tried several times and it wasn't a success. The only way to actually be able to successfully end the war of World War II, you actually had to use military power. And that is a strong point that will still stand in our own case. Because without the force of military power, Hitler would not listen to any of the negotiations that were made to stop any sort of negotiations that were made. But anyways, in respect of our own case, please vote for.
Partner ready?
Yep.
My time will begin now. First, I would like to clarify that the actual cause of World War II was Germany choosing to militarize. Now I will move on to my final focus. So the main points of clash in this debate were who best maintained peace or created positive peace and casualties caused by military power. We win on both because in a pro-world, we say we solve the root causes of issues, preventing future issues and creating a positive peace with a better world with less hate and racism. In a con world, military power only delays conflict before it results in a full-scale war. Negative peace is fostered and poisons relations. The con says they create this positive peace by ensuring safety with deterrence. However, tensions still build up and eventually cause war. They also say that if countries are victorious, it means positive peace will occur, which is totally incorrect, as positive peace is the integration of human society and the strengthening of relations as well as the economy and a better quality of life for people. Also, since we better maintain positive peace and create a better world with the use of diplomacy, which is very efficient and creates positive peace, we strongly urge a pro-ballot for this debate. Thank you.
Partner ready?
Oh, yeah.
Opponents ready?
Yeah.
Yep.
Judge ready? Okay, my time begins now. Essentially, what this debate came down to was what's more important, peace of protection or peace of happiness and alliances. They argue that the peace of alliances and state of mind, that the peace of alliances and making deals with people is more important than having a protection for your country and not being conquered. However, I argue and continue to argue that if your country does not have protection at all, it can and may be taken over. So not only will this create fear in the citizens, which contradicts their argument of that military power makes people afraid, not only will it prevent fear in citizens, it will also prevent a country from getting taken over. They argue that the use of deterrence, they twist the word deterrence in that, is that deterrence is used to build up and create arms races. This is not the purpose of deterrence. The purpose of deterrence is in order to protect the country. Just like our retired Lieutenant General said, the purpose of the United States military is to protect and defend our country, not build up to show that we are better than the others. And because of this, if this went away, it could potentially, in many scenarios, cause world chaos. And world chaos is not a good thing. Such as in many scenarios with terrorists and in World War II, military power is used to prevent chaos, which we believe chaos is more important than creating alliances. And for those reasons, Judge, we urge a con ballot. Thank you.